just do it for the dollar. We do it to help the people.
Yes.
How can we do better if we're a physicist and make an invention that can help the humanity?
Yeah.
In the Quran, this scripture, we're told that the only thing I expect of you, this is the God in paraphrase, I expect of you to love your fellow human being.
Yes. Love each other.
And
you know, I wish we can get this message through. And yes, it's important to pray, but how long does prayers take? 20 minutes a day? Half an hour a day? It's a small amount. So,
maximum.
So
it's a good daily exercise. You connect. It's more difficult to commit some insane thing. If you're in the prayer every day you're doing, you have to go back to God 5 times. But it's an interesting thing when the Prophet Muhammad was in his pretty ratty mosque. You know, it was, you know, after all, it was not much of a mosque.
Yes.
And
compared to today's mosque.
Yeah, I mean, it was a beautiful structure, but, you know, thatched roofs, and we think we have to have these grand things. And so he goes in there, and there's a group of people sitting down discussing the intellectuals. And then there were people praying. The people praying had expected he'd come and sit and pray with them for hours. And instead, he sat with the discussion group. So they came up to him, as you know, and said, why didn't you join us? He said, this is the real prayer, huh?
Yeah.
The real worship.
Knowledge and seeking knowledge and learning.
There's the prophetic statement that the seeking of God's creative power and contemplating and studying, contemplate also means studying, intense study of the divine creation is worth 70 years of prayer? 70 years of bowing.
And there's nothing like contemplating. Like I like to get up at night and watch the skies and watch the moon. And I wish, you know, I could go and visit all this place and be an astronaut and visit. But you see God's gloriness. And that's the only way.
It's the only way.
Yes.
It is the way.
Yeah.
And no wonder the grand prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, you know, use honey, we'll get into that, and use herbs, and use spices, and there's a cure for every disease. And why did he, and to brush the teeth, and to pick the teeth for bits of food, and not to eat right before bedtime, and because it's hard on the heart, and to sleep on the right side because the heart's on the left side, and if you sleep on the left side it compresses it a little bit, but more on the stomach, which is deadly. And you know,
if we look at all these things that we call sunnah, following the footsteps, they're all good. And it's a way of life, Islam. And that's what I'd like people to understand. Islam is a way of life. It's in our everyday thing to make our life simple, to enjoy life and have the best quality of life, as you might say.
It's totally a method to live this life in peace and productive and safety. So it's a wonderful thing, and all people have to study that. All people would benefit by his way.
Yes.
And his way is the way of the Quran.
It's unfortunately, some people has misrepresented it, and the media plays a big role too.
Well, the media is
only highlighting some of the bad acts that's committed by some of the Muslims, or a very few Muslims, and leave the whole thing.
Yeah, if any. I mean, people are wrongly blamed for things.
But sometimes Muslims, like everybody else, do commit
Well, if anybody does, for example, a good example of this, if anybody does such a thing, there was a poor man in Canada who was an immigrant from Iraq, and he came here to get away from the tyranny there. And because of the September 11th insanity, this man got drunk and said, "You're just a Muslim," and he killed him in the pool, on the pool hall. So we don't hear about that. You know, so the people are being oppressed, and the way of Islam is to help the people who are oppressed, to bring peace to this earth. It's never historically it was never the oppressor. Now the media is saying all sorts of things, but look at the history. The media doesn't read the Quran. It doesn't study the life of the Prophet. The media doesn't have any knowledge
of fairness, a lot of the scholars only focus that Islam is the hereafter, and they leave the contribution to this world. So in a way, we can't blame the media all the way. They have the role, they're focusing on certain points.
Right.
But I honestly take the responsibility, all of us as Muslims, where we misunderstand our religion. We don't know that Islam is everything you do in every daily
true.
life.
No, it's very true. We have this, we talk about non-Muslims misunderstanding, but the biggest misunderstanding is 1.3 billion people have to understand what they've got. not.
Yeah.
And then share that. But what's interesting is that our media never talks really, or very rarely, about the fact that historically Islam has not been the oppressor.
Never.
If we wanted to be fair,
the Crusades is the best example of that. The Crusades.
The Crusades, of course.
When the Crusades went into Jerusalem, they killed every Muslim and every Jewish person there.
It's true.
And yet when the Muslims went back, they treated everybody equal. Very good example of how, Islam has nothing to do with violence. Islam is equality and treating everybody good.
When the Jews were kicked out of Spain and they were floating on their casks and cargo and whatever they could find along the Mediterranean, who was it that picked them up and gave them housing and gave them a new country? The Sultan of Uthman, the Ottoman Sultan.
Yes, the Muslims.
They did it all over the place in Morocco, and the Jewish families are still there that were kicked out of Spain. So Islam has always been the modulating force, the moderate power. When a Christian was in chains, Christians and Muslims did engage in warfare, and other mercenary things happened. He was in chains with a few other prisoners in Ottoman Empire.
Yeah.
And the Ottoman Sultan, he was shivering, and he said, "What is it with you?" He said, "I'm afraid you're going to torture me." He said, "Well, you do that in your country. We don't do that here, so don't worry about it." So, I mean, torture... actually, right now, the people of Islam are being tortured. And that has to be really said. For example, in Afghanistan and Iraq and Palestine and in Somalia.
Yeah, but let's not forget, and some Muslims do commit torture out of misunderstanding. We misunderstand and we misapply Islam.
A Muslim could not commit torture.
Should not.
He could not. If he did, he couldn't be.
Yeah, a Muslim. And because we are a religion. But how
as
do you
such,
bring
torture,
all
but
this?
still, even so, as a system.
Yeah.
For example, according to the New York Times, this is not controversial, it's New York Times, okay?
Yeah.
New York Times said that no doubt that our people, agents from the United States, trained and were the Savak. In other words, that in Iran and Persia, that was trained here. So we exported torture from America, for instance.
Yeah.
And we know about Mr. Arar. So as a rule, and as a big rule, Islam has fought torture. The whole purpose of Islam is to stop the torture of the innocent. And then, of course, the Bible is the same.
Yes.
The purpose of the Bible is to bring peace to the people.
But that's what I say, all religions are the same. They're all from the same God, from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is the one God, and the message is the same.
It's the same.
So it doesn't change.
We as a Muslim people believe that Abraham is the patriarch, and that our brothers are the Christians and the Jews.
Yes.
We believe in our scripture intently. We don't regard it to be something that should be defiled. And everybody talks about the Quran, for example, being defiled by being shot at. But what about the people?
Yeah.
The defilement is in the innocents. But we don't feel that this should be defiled purposely, nor do we, and at the same way, we have a sacred desire for the Bible and the Torah and the Gospel, and we have a sacred love for Mary and Jesus and Moses. And dare we ever even say such even a minor negative thing about any such one for fear of being, punished.
Well, Dr. Kaasem, thank you. This is a great discussion, and we'll talk again in the future. Well, we're coming to the end of the show. Once again, I would like you to visit our website, www.spiritofislam.com, and see how you can help us, how can you contribute. If you like our show and you enjoy this kind of discussions, as I mentioned before, I believe in the show should be a frank discussion, non-rehearsed, and it comes from the heart. One thing that was really encouraging, I got a message from a young lady that said there's a lot of Islamic shows on the air, but one thing I like about your show, Brother Ashraf, it comes from the heart and it teaches us how to love Islam and how to love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, if you like this kind of programming, you like this kind of shows, please help us keep going, help support the show. Visit our website or send us an email or call. And thank you very much. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.